From Pocketnow.com, this is Pocketnow Weekly.
Hello, and welcome to episode 018 of the Pocketnow Weekly, the once-a-week podcast from Pocketnow.com, where we discuss what's hot and what's cool in the world of mobile technology. Windows, Android, iPhone, sometimes even BlackBerry, sometimes even Symbian. We discuss everything that's mobile. I'm your host, Michael Fisher, senior editor at Pocketnow. I'm joined by our managing editor, Anton D. Naju. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Greetings, everybody.
And by our editor-in-chief, Brandon Miniman. Good morning to you.
Hello.
Hello, hello. We've been going over, listeners and fellow and co-host, we've been going over on our target time by like half an hour, by like 40 minutes. The last couple episodes of the weekly have been like almost 2 hours long. And
yeah, buy one and get one free.
Been ridiculous, exactly. So we're going to try and keep it a little bit tighter today. I know we always say that, but we have a plan. There's a somewhat shorter topic list, and we're going to get in depth. But before we jump into the real topics of the day, just for our abbreviated podcast pre-show / thought thread, I want to take a nostalgia trip. This is episode 018. This is episode 18 of the Pocketnow Weekly, which coincidentally happens to be the age that I was when I bought my first mobile phone. Listeners, if you don't reside in America, I know it's different in every country. In America, 18 is when you can do a lot of things. You can vote, you can serve in the military.
Except drink.
You can't drink, which is absurd, but that's going to be a topic for a whole nother podcast. But you start kind of taking control of your life in a legal sense. And I was due to take a trip to Washington, D.C. with my then girlfriend, and I was going to borrow my mother's cell phone, which was this thing, and I was like, well, I don't want to really do that. So I went to Radio Shack, which is where I got my first mobile phone, and so I didn't have any credit. And in America, if you want to be with one of the bigger wireless carriers, of course you need a lot of credit history, or you're going to pay a $500 deposit or a $200 deposit or something. But not with Sprint in 2001. Where you could, yeah,
that explains it.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Where there was no deposit, no special fees, no nothing, and I got a Samsung SCH 3500. And readers might remember this from our short-lived series on where we're coming from a couple months back. But it was one of those analog and digital, dual mode phones that was a flip phone, but it wasn't a clamshell. Like the screen was always present, but you guys know what I'm talking about, where the flip like goes over the screen and the screen is visible whether it's open or closed. Mm-hmm. It was the coolest thing to have in 2000 and 2001. And my favorite feature of this phone, of which I carried for, even when it was my first phone, I didn't manage to carry more than a year. I was bored of it in 6 months, and I had to get something else. But I adored it so much. My favorite feature was the voice dialing, which Sprint was aggressively pushing back then, and it had 10 slots, and you had to record. You had to record the phrase. It didn't recognize words. It just recognized the sound. So you were like, call dad at home, and it's like re-record. Okay, call dad at home, and then and then it would recognize that, and it worked well. And for all of the 49 contacts that it stored, I could dial 10 of them in a voice dialing fashion. So that's my little nostalgia trip of the morning. I want to hear Brandon's first phone ever, because Tony's answer is going to be more exotic to me as a Romanian answer. So Brandon, tell us about your first phone.
Is this for a smartphone or any phone?
Your first mobile phone. We're going a little afield of our normal area of expertise.
I had this Kyocera joint. What I would do, this was before the days of smartphones. Well, I guess it would be in the mid to early 2000s. And I would go to the Verizon store, because my mom was on Verizon, my dad too. And I would go into the store, and I would look for the display or the device with the most amount of pixels on the screen. I kid you not.
No way. Even back then?
I have, my love for pixels started, I think, when I got my Speak and Spell. When I noticed that the little the little digits would be crisp and clear. It was great.
Was that
so
like a 25
I found this.
PPI
It was
display?
like a Kyocera phone. It wasn't a smartphone. It had probably a 64 by 300 gray dot matrix display, and it really didn't do very much. But I would spend hours flipping through the menu systems just because I cared about the deepest settings of the phone, kind of like I would do with my TI-83 in high school, and that's another story. But it had a retractable antenna, and I remember I would chew on it kind of as a weird habit, and my mother didn't like that very much. But I mean, it was kind of boring, but at the time, I was like, wow, look at all these pixels. I can almost see a graphic if I squint.
Right, you can almost see a diagonal line that's not terribly jagged. I remember.
Yeah, I mean, it was still like a staircase.
Right.
The diagonal lines, like a what is that thing? The Etch-a-Sketch. It's like an Etch-a-Sketch.
Right. Right. Wow, that's awesome. I can't believe your obsession with pixel density goes back that far. But that's crazy. What about you, Tony?
Coincidentally, I was also 18 when I got my first mobile phone, but that happened in 1998. So I got to use the dinosaurs in the technology, and my very first phone was the Ericsson GA628. It was this huge phone, which basically, I'm looking at the spec sheet right now. The size of the display wasn't in pixels, but it was in characters. So it had 1 by 12 charts. So
I'm looking at it right now as well. That is look at those big round
and
buttons.
that phone had interchangeable color plates. So if you look at the stock images, that blue thing, you could change that out with yellow or red or green or whatever your color flavor was. But I had upgraded, I think it was 6 months later than that, to a Bosch 607, which had a display of 4 by 16 characters, which had a orange backlight, and it was awesome. It had an extendable antenna, and of course, in 1998, that was the year when the first cellular companies started off in Romania. The first two, which were later acquired by Vodafone and Orange, respectively. One thing, just as a misc, when my battery died in my initial Ericsson GA628, my dad cracked open the battery case and replaced the batteries with normal AA size batteries, 4 of them, and that gave me 1 week. Yeah, that gave me 1 week of battery life. I wish I could do that now.
That's awesome. I remember reading a story about a guy trying to modify his Palm SCH i500 and to put a Bluetooth module in or something back in the day. And he, I may have spoken about this before, but he nicked the battery bag while he was inside the casing. And apparently this blue column of flame just shot up from the phone and like ate his kitchen ceiling. I mean, it's amazing how much power is contained in these lithium-ion cells and how volatile they are if you screw with them. Thank you for indulging me in this this kind of off-topic thought thread, gents, because it's so funny too. Like listeners and you guys, like if you just have a nostalgia trip and you want to Google pictures of old phones that you or your friends may have done, because I was Googling your answers, guys, and the internet was so low res back in 2002 or 2001. Like the pictures that I got, particularly of your Bosch 607, Tony, are like they're blown up a little bit, so it's like 460 by 345 is the biggest image I can find, and even that is like it's just tiny.
What was the name of that internet service on feature phones? It was like $5 a minute, and it was like not even close to the real web. What was that called? Something with Coffee Cup or Java or?
Oh, well, Java.
WAP?
Oh, what? Yeah, like like when it was written in WAP standard and stuff like that.
Yeah, we had and we still have WAP access around here.
Really?
Yeah, I mean that's for free for normal prepaid phones, aside from data connection.
Yeah.
So WAP usually comes for free here.
You remember when the wireless internet used to be charged on a per minute basis, like minutes? It was like circuit switch data. Nightmarish.
Gives me the Oakleys.
Right. Well, let's jump back into modern day here. With we're gonna want to lead off the week with a bunch of Android stuff. And Brandon, I would like you to kick this off because you have the most experience with this. Google opened up pre-orders for the Nexus 4 and the Nexus 10, and I think our headline probably says it best. Google's pre-order experience for the Nexus 4 and 10 was horrible.
Yeah, let me start off from the very beginning. So usually when a company has a new product up for sale that is hot and desired, that's a funny way to start it. They give you a pre-order time. Like, everyone knows that Apple pre-orders start at midnight Pacific or 3 a.m. Eastern. So Google, up until the day of the Nexus 4 and 10 pre-order, had on their page, it said pre-orders start on, I think it was the 13th of November. And so no one really knew when it was going to start. So I got up at 3 a.m. and I kept refreshing the page until 4 a.m. Yes, I am a little crazy in that respect. And so I thought to myself, okay, probably it's going to be later in the morning. And by the time 4 a.m. came around, I was checking some of the tech sites and they said, it looks like it's going to be at noon Pacific, or actually noon Eastern, and 9 a.m. Pacific. So I said, okay, so I'll wait till the next day. So I go to my computer after lunch and I sit down. It's 11:45, 15 minutes before the pre-order. I go to the Nexus 4 pre-order page. There's an add to cart button. I'm like, sweet, I'm 15 minutes early. Nice. I'm going to get my Nexus 4. I click add to cart, and then I go into my cart, and it says your cart is empty. I proceed to do that exact thing about 15 to 20 times. And that takes me about 15 or 20 minutes. So then it's 12 o'clock. And by that time, the add to cart button had changed to a notify me button, as if they were sold out within 15 minutes, even though the pre-order didn't really start yet. They turned it on 15 minutes early. And so I sat there frustrated. I did get an order in for the Nexus 10, but it was really the Nexus 4 I was after. So I kept hitting refresh. And it just so happens that every 1 out of 20 page loads, the notify button would change to add to cart. So I'm thinking, sweet, maybe, they've got some more inventory. It's only 12:10, 10 minutes after the pre-order. And so I click add to cart, and I go to my cart, and it's in the cart. And I'm like, yes, I'm going to do this. So then I hit the proceed button, and then this thing rotates, and it times out. And then I'm like, that's okay. I still have it in my cart. I go back to my cart. It says your cart is empty. So I start cursing profusely. I go back to that page. I refresh. I keep doing that. So that after a very long time, it takes about 2 hours, I successfully placed an order for an 8 gigabyte model. But I didn't want the 8 gigabyte model. I kind of got it by accident. So I thought to myself, okay, I'll get the 8 gigabyte model. I'll send it to one of the other Pocketnow guys. And
let's toss the scraps to the guys. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, okay, it's 2 hours later. I'm going to try for a 16 gig. So I keep refreshing the page, and then I get the add to cart button. And after a very long time, I finally successfully order a 16 gigabyte Nexus 4.
At this point, the sun is up, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're at like 3 p.m. at this point. So I'm feeling pretty confident, and then I go into the Google Play Store where they show you order status, and I'm very curious about when I'm going to get the Nexus 4. I'm thinking maybe I'll get it the next day on Wednesday. Maybe I'll get it the day after that on Thursday. And so I see both of my orders listed, the 8 gigabyte and the 16 gigabyte. The 8 gigabyte under status says complete, which is weird with no shipping info. The 16 gigabyte version says shipping estimate, November 15th. Mm-hmm. So I'm a little frustrated thinking, okay, if it ships on the 15th, I probably won't get it till the 16th or the 19th. And so then the 15th comes around, and then Google sends out these emails to most people that pre-ordered the Nexus 4 and said, that says, due to overwhelming demand, we're not going to be shipping these for 3 weeks. Oh, but we're going to give you free shipping for all of your troubles.
Because that's the same as being awesome. Yeah.
And I've just got to wonder, number one, how could the tech company with the most amount of servers in the world have such a screw up with the pre-order process? How could their communication have failed so tremendously? And why didn't? What was wrong with their system that had so many people thinking that they successfully placed an order for a Nexus 4 when really the stock was probably sold out within 3 or 4 minutes? I mean, how many units did they have? 100 units? Yeah. It was the worst pre-order experience ever. And if I was an average person, I would probably say, screw the Nexus 4. I'm going to get a Galaxy S3 or a Droid DNA or something, because this is just ridiculous.
Yeah, and I'm looking for, mentions. I just Googled, like Google pre-order fiasco Nexus 4. I'm kind of looking for other reports on this, and everyone's kind of reporting on the back order and stuff. But it doesn't seem like Google hasn't offered any comment on this, right? They're just, sorry, here's some free shipping. That's basically the extent of their involvement.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't even know if Google really owes anyone an apology. I mean, we're so used to companies like Apple anticipating the high demand, and so you can still place your pre-order right after they sell out. It's just the shipping date changes. There's a lot of transparency. They tell you, you're going to have to wait a little bit. Right. But Google just was completely non-communicative about this whole entire process, and it probably pissed off a lot of people.
It sounds like yet another kind of fail on Google's end in the customer service department. I feel like Google is I feel like Google's like a giant version of us when we get really busy and a whole bunch of comments come in and we can't answer them all like right away. Because we generally do make an effort to answer comments that ask questions and comments that pose interesting points of discussion. But sometimes, you're just so busy that you can't handle it. I feel like Google is that way with orders.
Yeah, maybe. But if Google's trying to make a world-class device here that is better than anything else, they need to provide world-class customer service, a world-class order experience.
Agreed.
I mean, those are the bare minimums, right?
Yeah. No, I concur. And I mean, while we're talking about it too, that I went out to get some coffee today, and there was a box on my porch that had a circular logo on it, and I felt sure it was the Samsung logo, and I was really excited, but it turned out to be an Old Navy package from my neighbor. So screw you, Old Navy, and your branding. So I'm waiting on a Nexus 10 today, which listeners, if you're listening to this before it goes up, keep refreshing Pocketnow, because we're going to have an unboxing on that shortly. Brandon, thank you for soldiering on through all those difficulties there. It's unfortunate that took place, but it's more concerning to me in kind of a sense of what could come from Google in the future, because customer service, particularly in the wireless industry, particularly in the wireless carrier industry, has typically gone by the wayside. And Google, there's a report from the Wall Street Journal today that Google is reportedly in talks to become a wireless carrier. Tony, you wrote this story, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
What? Can you just give us a very quick rundown of this rumor and how is this different from rumors like this in the past?
Well, I can't tell you exactly, but I can tell you this much. This is that kind of news which you can post under, I don't know, a huge question mark, because the original source, the Wall Street Journal, cited some, of course, anonymous sources within the who are familiar with the matter, to be specific, that said that some said that Google might have, but then again, some others said that Google might have not discussed with a certain TV provider, satellite TV provider, Dish Network. The name doesn't say anything to me here in Europe. Maybe you guys in the US know it better.
They're pretty big here. AMC hates them, but yeah.
Yeah, so that's the entire thing, that Google might have or might not have discussed with Dish Network to use their part of the spectrum to start a network provider, basically, who would compete with the AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, and the others.
I think that the best case scenario here, if it comes to fruition, is a dramatically changed wireless industry for the better. Because we know that when Google enters a new industry like this, let's say with their fiber, they offer it, one, at a very low cost, and two, at extremely fast advanced speeds. Right. So if Google gets this right, it's very possible that they could offer plans that are half as expensive. They could launch LTE Advanced right out of the bat with some compatible phones that go with it.
I was just going to ask if they would go LTE Advanced right out the gate. It sounds like something they would do, right?
It sounds like something they would do, giving us 100 megabits per second down and so forth. But of course, this is a highly regulated industry, and you might see something like Google Fiber, where they start off in like one city and then two cities. And at this rate, Google Fiber, for example, I think will be ubiquitous in a very long period of time. In fact, so far away that this advantage that they have of 1 gigabit per second internet might be less of an advantage, because Verizon and Comcast and all those internet providers see it coming.
Right.
And the same thing could happen with the wireless thing. But they've been working on this or talking about it. I'm assuming they've been working on it for a very long time. So I have reason to believe that if they were to launch a wireless carrier, that it would be closer to the former scenario where it's in a lot of cities and it's advanced. It's LTE advanced.
Guys, a couple of commenters were happy because allegedly there is some sort of monopoly in the form of not one carrier, but more carriers in the States agreeing on rates and stuff like that. And they basically applauded the idea of Google entering the market. But here's one thing for you guys. I'm Google, and you are the two biggest carriers, AT&T and Verizon. Mm-hmm. And I tell you guys, okay, starting January 1, 2013, I'm going to start my own network, and my rates will be basically half of your rates. What will you guys say? And I don't know exactly, but here's what I would say. I would say, you know what, Google? Get all your Android phones off of my shelves and sell it yourself.
Yeah, right. But then you got to, if I'm Verizon or AT&T, I've got to see what that's going to do to my bottom line, right? Because I can't just subsist on iPhones and Windows phones.
Yeah, but you'll kill Google if you do that. So it's basically bluffing.
Right.
Well, the wireless carriers couldn't just pull their Android phones. I mean, that's probably the majority of their business at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't think that's a reasonable threat. If Google came out with plans that were half as expensive, I think they would probably be investigated by the antitrust people in suits, because that would be sort of using Google's
scale,
scale or power to influence the market. And it, let's face it, these carriers can't cut their plans in half. They already especially Sprint and T-Mobile, they need more revenue so that they can survive.
Yeah, right.
So this would be terribly destructive. That would be terribly destructive. And Google probably knows that, and they probably don't want to be investigated. And so they probably would have lower rate plans, but they wouldn't come in at a dramatically lower price.
Yeah.
And even if they did, like I said, I don't think carriers are going to drop Android because they need Android.
It's a very interesting thing to think about a new carrier, and this will be my last thought on it. I think that it's been a long time since those of us in the geek sector have really thought about carriers, and that used to be, those used to be the fanboy wars. Back when dumb phones were kind of, they were never really quite the same, but there were much fewer differences between dumb phones as there are between smartphones. And people would fight on the internet, not over their manufacturer usually, though that happened too. They would fight over their carrier. I would sit there and watch people defend Bell Atlantic against, MCI or whatever. And it was just like, okay, so I haven't thought about carriers in a long time, except in the context of this is the pipe that allows my cool device to work. But I think Google, if they ever did this, they would bring something a lot more interesting to the equation.
I don't think they will. I don't think they will enter.
Enter? Yeah, I think this does smell like one of those rumors that just is kind of like a pipe dream, right? It'll never come to pass. Who knows? We'll see.
Another thing they could do, just letting my creativity run a little wild, is that they could be the first carrier to do exclusively LTE over voice, since they'd be, all their phones could support it
with LTE Advanced, and they could just.
I don't think you need LTE Advanced to do that, but you need
Volt
phones to do it.
Yeah, you just need to implement voice over LTE on the network side, and then the phones need to be compatible with that. Are any phones out there right now VoLTE compatible? VoLTE?
Wasn't the HTC Thunderbolt VoLTE capable, but they never flipped that on?
Something was.
Do you guys remember that?
I feel like I wrote a piece on this and then immediately forgot everything I learned. I don't know. That will be interesting because, as we've talked about a little bit, like once or twice, we have these amazingly capable data devices in our hands, but the minute we make a phone call, it's going over this this network that only supports it's like 13 kilobits per second codecs. Yeah, which is which was implemented because they needed a lot of compression because voice calls take up a lot of bandwidth, or they used to. And so it makes sense, but you sound terrible. I hate talking on the phone. It's one of the reasons I hate talking on the phones, because it's like, what did you say? You sound like.
Don't you guys have HD voice?
Well, the phones are launching with it, but the networks aren't capable of handling it right now.
Well, Orange here in Romania has HD voice.
Have you ever heard it, Tony?
Yeah.
Really?
How is
So
it?
whenever it's like CD quality voice. Whenever you are on a 3G coverage, then it will switch automatically to HD voice, and it's basically CD quality versus the old LP or cassette.
That's awesome. This
awesome.
is putting me in mind of having old phone conversations back in the day when I was selling iDen, when I was selling Nextel. Like the voice quality was so good because iDen is different and weird and whatever. But I used to. You ever talk to those people on the phone who don't have a good phone voice? And I don't mean it's annoying. I mean that their voice has that particular frequency range that they sound muddy all the time. You can barely hear what they're saying. I used to date a girl who was like, I love hanging out with you, but I do not want to talk to you on the phone because I can't hear a word you're saying.
I have no idea what you're saying right now. Stop talking.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway.
I sort of know what you mean. The Evo 4G LTE on Sprint is HD voice capable, although I don't know if they've rolled that out.
No,
the iPhone 5 is actually, I think it has a competing high definition thingy called, like, what are they? It's like what is it called? It's like full spectrum or.
I remember hearing about that. Yeah. And we were all got really excited in the live chat. We were like, oh, dude, HD voice. And then everyone's like, yeah, but nobody's going to support it.
Yeah. I don't think carriers care about it. I don't think there are many people. I mean, everyone's so used to the 13 kilobit per second audio quality of a phone call, then they care a little bit more about data speeds. I'd imagine.
It's called wideband audio, by the way. Yeah, and they made a big deal about how it boosts the mid-range. Phil Schiller's talking about it in an animated fashion on my screen.
Guys, I'm just looking at my carrier, and I was looking at the carrier because I remembered having HD voice calls with lower-end phones too. So I had an HD voice using my Samsung Taylor developer Windows Phone 7 device from back in the day, and so here's the page from Orange Romania. It says phones with HD voice. Apple iPhone 5, LG Optimus L7, HTC Desire C, HTC One S, HTC One X, Nokia Asha 302, Lumia 610, Lumia 800, Lumia 900, Galaxy S2, Galaxy Ace, Galaxy S3.
That's a ton of phones with HD voice.
Yeah,
it's a lot of phones. Wow,
yeah,
I'm surprised.
Geez, I'm surprised too. See, this is when you get into that kind of differing network, capacity thing where you're like, well, wait. So where's this compatible and what's going on? And then I wonder if I did like some street tests. This would be fun to do in about a year when some carriers in America have it rolled out, and just do some on the street sidewalk interviews. Like, please, let's just do this test phone call for 10 seconds and tell me which one sounds better, and see if anybody can actually tell the difference on the street.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what Skype's bitrate is, because Skype has such good audio quality.
I'm wondering about that too. Yeah.
I just searched Google for Skype bitrate, and I found
it's probably variable based on speed, network speed, and bandwidth.
Yeah, just like when you stream video, and it's when you have a fast connection, it will flip to HD, and then if your connection drops to lower speed, then it will switch to SD.
Yeah, you used to be able to force your phone back in the day to use a different codec. Excuse me, if you wanted higher voice quality, but then the network would always override it. This is like a whole nostalgia day for me of like ye old Howard Forums talks. Anyway, let's move on, guys, because there's actually big news that we want to talk about, and this is kind of my biggest news of the week because I was the one who was there. I covered the HTC and Verizon announcement in New York City on Tuesday for their latest collaboration, which ended up being the Droid DNA. This is HTC's, if you must have heard about it, but if you haven't, it's HTC's newest device for Verizon Wireless. Yeah, this device that they called about 1,500 times at the presentation, the ultimate droid. The ultimate was their huge buzzword of the day.
Does that mean it's the last one?
Yeah, right.
It's the final?
It's the HTC Omega. It's the phone that the public is kind of, if you haven't handled it, it's very tempting to call it a phablet. And it's, I think, something we've talked about on the podcast over and over again as the Butterfly J for Japan, as the DIX, the DLX. But it's not. It's not any of those things. The Butterfly J is out in Japan, but this is our version in America. It's the Droid DNA. And I think there's an unlocked version planned as well. It is not at all a phablet. in the hand, it feels almost identical to the One X. It feels like a lengthened HTC One X, with design cues from Windows Phone 8, and of course a giant 5-inch 1080p panel. But despite the fact that this panel is so comparatively huge, because of the way the phone is designed, it just doesn't feel any bigger in the hand, really. It feels a lot like the iPhone 5, to be honest with you. Not in terms of like its metal, its materials, but in its form factor. It's thin, and it is lengthy in the hand, and it's great. I really, really, really like it, and I know Brandon over there has been just amped to hear about this because it's
to ask you about Pixels.
Display. I was going to say, right?
I do have some questions for you, Michael.
Yeah, please, because I've got it in my hand right now. It is the black version, the only one that is around at the moment. And ask away, man. This thing is.
I'm smelling a Joe Levi tweet with you saying you have it in your hand.
I knew.
Yeah.
I should say I was tempted to say that's what she said about 7 times. In the last
this is a very heavy day for that's what she said. It's like almost that's what she said, right? Yeah, yes. Go ahead.
Figure it's unprofessional. Yeah, so I guess to put forth one observation in your comparison video with the Optimus G, I was amazed to see that despite all those pixels and with a similar processor, the Droid DNA keeps up and in some cases beats the Optimus G, right?
Right. So yeah, there's the background on that is Joe Levi wrote an editorial on basically saying the DNA is likely to be slower than the Optimus G, and why you shouldn't care. And it's a good editorial, and basically that's his argument, right? These phones run very similar hardware under the hood. They've got the Qualcomm Snapdragon S4 Pro, 2 gigs of RAM, yada yada, and the same GPU, of course. But the DNA is driving like twice as many pixels. And actually, the math gets a little fuzzy on that. We don't know if it's 2 million pixels, whatever. But it's like, yeah, there's a lot more display to drive. So wouldn't you think this would be a slower phone? And it's not. I tested them in a side-by-side video. The Optimus G was just off a fresh factory reset, and the DNA obviously was brand new. And no, I mean, it runs just smooth as silk, even with HTC Sense 4 Plus on it, which is something else.
So you're using this phone, and obviously the display is stunning, and that's great if you want to show your friends at a party or if you want to watch a 1080p movie and get a magnifying glass out. But when you're actually using the phone, when you're emailing, browsing the web, on Twitter and Facebook, do you think to yourself and stop and say, this is better? This is better than the Galaxy S3. This is better than the Optimus G? Or is it just kind of fade away and it's you kind of forget about all those pixels?
I think that's going to be the last question I have to answer to myself before I write the review, because there's all these competing things happening in my brain, right? Where like I look at the thing and I'm like, this is absolutely a beautiful display. And you look at rounded corners on the Sense clock, and it's like there is not a hint. Obviously, it's 440 ppi. There's not a hint of any pixelation there. But at the same time, I'm like, but I'm being conditioned, right? I know this is a 1080p phone. I understand that the display is a huge part of it. Am I seeing something? Am I making it up? Is my brain seeing more of a difference than it's actually there between this and a 720p display? I will tell you before I answer that question for myself, which will be, for the review, this is absolutely one of the most beautiful displays I've ever encountered. And the viewing angles, HTC was big to point out that you can view it from like 80-degree offset. You can actually probably view it from
pretty amazing.
Oh, it's nuts. I mean, I'm looking at it almost edge on right now, and it's as though I'm holding one of those cardboard screened demo models for like third-party retailers, because like
printed on paper.
It's like it's paper right on the face of the thing. It is just incredible.
I was about to ask, Michael, when we're at shows and we're checking out new display panels or new phones, the manufacturer usually embeds phones in the table and covers up the phones themselves and only leaves the screen so you can compare the screens between their flagship and the competition. Right. Now imagine this. If you would only see the screen of the HTC One X, which was a great screen, compared to the screen on the Droid DNA, would you find any difference? Would you say that, okay, this is hands down the best, or this is hands down better, or this is obviously the Droid DNA and the other one is the One X?
That is a really good question. There is a shape difference here. The DNA screen is taller, so of course that is whether that's good or bad is up to you. As far as resolution-wise, I just don't know. I need to have a look at them both. I unfortunately don't have a 1X in the Boston office anymore to compare it with, but I will tell you, I think, and this may be a software thing, I certainly think it is much more impressive than the display on the Galaxy S3. But I need to do, some comparisons here and see. I would really like to do, speaking of on-the-street stuff, something similar to the thing I just suggested with the display. I'd like to just go up to a random person and be like, here's 2 phones, and they're covered up. And it's like, which display do you find more appealing,
We got to get you on the streets, Michael. You keep bringing this
for
up.
real. I want to do some investigative reporting. Get Jaime up here with a rig, and I'll have a handheld microphone. What's interesting about this, though, guys, is that, there's a lot that HTC stole from itself in the Windows Phone, from the Windows Phone 8X. It's this kind of form factor, which is very narrow on the edges, and if you look at it edge on the top or bottom, it almost looks like the Nokia Smile, even. Where it has the bulging back and the thin edges. It is lightweight. And the front-facing camera is also that same ultra-wide angle thing, which HTC was very keen on showing us. And by the way, their whole presentation was really cool. It was very brief. They showed us a Droid video. They had the president of HTC America come up and the Verizon CMO, and it was quick. It was brief. It was fun, and they got us a review unit promptly, which we really appreciate. I gotta tell you though, the responsiveness. This is HTC Sense. This is Sense 4 Plus running on top of Jelly Bean 4.1.1, I think. And it's the way Sense was supposed to be. I mean, it doesn't feel like it. It feels like TouchWiz.
That's interesting.
Almost. It is, isn't it?
I was going to frame my next question around Sense because, in the example of the 1X, you've got this gorgeous screen, this great hardware, and then this Sense which just lags in places.
Yeah.
So what if you took the great things about Sense? The email client is amazing, although I know you use Gmail. The widgets are beautiful, and you made it really fast, lag-free, and then you put it on a really awesome display. Is that enough, Michael, for you to say in the future prefer a Sense 4 Plus phone with the same configuration? You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. This is not a cop-out. It is just a function of the fact that I've had other phones to deal with, and the DNA is still very new to me. I don't know yet. There are things that I miss from TouchWiz. I certainly don't miss the TouchWiz Nature UX, cartoony carnival, stupid leaves floating on water, tap, ripple effect, drop water thing. But I do miss its useful notification shade toggles. I miss press and hold the power button for even more cool options. I miss, Sense is not as intuitive that way, I don't think. And also, Sense has these, it's easy to forget that Sense has its own unique design language that is not always good, particularly in audio feedback. I don't need my phone to sound like a typewriter. And every time I tap on something in HTC Sense, it's like clack, clack, clack. I'm like, why are you doing this? This is not a Smith Corona. I'm not sure yet, but
I have a final question.
Yeah, Tony, hit me.
So you guys remember when we planned the coverage for the Droid DNA, and I was like, guys, I really hope the screen is not the only selling point of this phone.
Right.
Now let me hit you with this question. If the Droid DNA would not have a 1080p screen, but a HD screen like the others on the market, would this be an interesting phone, or would it be just a Droid, just another Android?
Does it have an S4 Pro, Tony?
Yeah.
For me, it would still be interesting because of its form factor. Tony, does the screen have the same dimensions in your hypothetical? I mean, I know it doesn't have the same resolution, but it's still a 5-inch screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's say everything is the same except for the resolution.
I still think it would be, because I think HTC has brought their beautiful 2012 kind of design revolution to this in a big way. It's got these really nice perforated red strips on the left and right. It's got that front-facing camera that's ultra-wide angle, which is actually, I could see being useful in a couple situations. it's got a great feel in the hand. It feels like a premium product, and its senses run so well on top of this. I would still be excited about this, yes.
And now a question for both of you guys. Do you think this is too little too late with HTC continuing to crumble 50, 60% quarter on quarter? I mean, do you think it's enough for HTC to save themselves with this unit? Let's say it will go global. The HTC Deluxe will hit global markets. Is this enough?
I don't think it's enough by itself personally, but I think that it's definitely going to help them, particularly since Verizon seems very, very dedicated to this launch in a way that other carriers are not necessarily as dedicated to their launch, and we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, I think with Verizon behind them, this is going to sell pretty well in America, because I think this is going to be the Droid of the holiday season.
I think that this phone is, of course, the first 1080p phone, and that's getting headlines. Mm-hmm. And you kind of look back historically at firsts and to see what effect it's had. So we have HTC with the Evo 4G, with the first 4G phone in the US. Does that matter today? Not really. We've got the first 720p screen on the Galaxy Nexus by Samsung. Does that matter today? Sort of. You know, it sort of paved the way for Samsung to be a leader in these high-res displays. And the 1080p thing could very well do that for HTC. They could create variations of this form factor with that highly acclaimed screen. I think it's tough to answer that question until, Michael, you answered that operative question. And
yeah, I agree, it will be, and that's a good, interesting way to look at it, is from a perspective of firsts. I tell you, I did watch an episode of Star Trek Enterprise last night in 1080p on this thing, and I think they shot that in 1080. I hope they shot it in 1080. Well, anyway, it was the only thing I could think of. I was trying to get to sleep, and God, it was beautiful. I mean, it just. Because normally when I'm watching Netflix on my phone, I'm watching like SD episodes from 1997 of some old TV show, right? So I can't tell the difference. But on this one, I definitely wanted to fire up a full HD, and it is gorgeous. And I'll tell you right up front, the battery life doesn't seem to be a problem, even with that relatively small 2,000 milliamp hour cell.
That is good.
Yeah,
that's great. Have you tested out the camera?
Yeah.
Is it better than it doesn't sound like it's better than the One X. It's probably the same as the One X, right?
Well, I made sure to ask HTC about that, and they said that the optics, physically the camera module is identical, but the tuning on the software side has been optimized. So we'll have to see it in different conditions. I will tell you, I took that shot I took this morning of the Old Navy box sitting in my front lobby. Was with the DNA camera, and the lighting was crappy, but you zoom in on that thing, and it's like. It's a little like zooming in on a Nintendo game. I mean, there's some crazy pixelation. I mean, it's really bad lighting. We'll have to see how it performs out on the street.
The One X performed well in excellent lighting conditions, but once the lighting is say normal or less than normal, you just got pixels.
Wow, this picture's terrible.
Oh,
terrible.
Did you look at it? Yeah. So don't.
It's zoomed out. It's terrible.
Yeah, I know. And like I said, that is pretty much the worst lighting I could pick. If I wanted to like put a phone through camera boot camp, that's the lighting I would pick. So we'll see. But I want to keep talking cameras. I do want to switch platforms while we talk cameras. We're gonna have a lot more chat on the DNA, I'm sure, next week, because the review will be up by the next time we speak. But let's talk Lumia. Let's jump on over to the Windows Phone world, and we've got a lot of news from this, and it's so nice to have talked about this for months. I mean, ever since the podcast started, even we've been talking pretty much every week about. Can't wait till the Lumias get here. I can't wait to actually finally, be a member of the club. And I just finished my Lumia 810 review, where I gave it a 7 out of 10. And to make this segue for real. Just to talk about the camera real quick, Adam Lane and I got to meet in person, first of all. One by one, I'm meeting everyone from Pocketnow in person. Adam Lane is a tall guy. I didn't know this.
Is he taller than me?
He's got to be as tall as you.
Ooh.
Tony's like, he's fired. No, it was great. Well, we met. I came into New York City for the HTC event, and Adam and I had arranged to meet to do a shootout of the same scene using like 6 or 7 cameras. And the results of that can be seen on my Lumia 810 review and Adam's Lumia 920 review. Adam whipped that up because he's our resident awesome photographer and Windows Phone guy. So anyway, we shot the same scene with a bunch of cameras, and we were surprised to find that the Lumia 810, which means the Lumia 820, because the Lumia 810 is just a T-Mobile version of the 820 with some different externals and internals. So it's just a different phone. What a crappy sentence that was. We were surprised to find that the Lumia 810 has essentially the same camera performance in at least some circumstances as the Lumia 920. There's no optical image stabilization, obviously, and it doesn't have the PureView brand, but the resolution is almost the same, and the camera's performance is almost the same. And that means whether you're a glass half full or half empty person, it's going to depend on whether that means the 920 has a crappy camera or the 810 has an awesome camera. I happen to have both units in my possession at the moment, and I will say for a mid-range phone, that 810 shoots a good picture.
Is that so? That's why it's as thick as it is, because it's got the optics that maybe they just didn't call it PureView to keep the sales down and the 920 sales up.
Well, remember, no, it doesn't have the same optics because the 920 has that optical image stabilization rig, that mechanical image stabilization. So the 920, I think, the module on there has to be thicker. I think I will have to see a teardown of each to confirm that, but. The Lumia 810 is definitely a thick phone, though. I'll tell you.
Guys,
that.
I'm looking at that pattern with the boot, which you guys shot from several angles with several devices, and I still think the Nokia N8 is the best there.
And that's a point that Adam made as well. Yeah, the Nokia N8 was the oldest phone we had in that shootout, and that Adam had brought that along.
That's still right there, yeah. It's
striking to me how much the colors vary between all these phones. Like some of them, like the Razr M is just atrocious. And not in general, but compared to all the rest of these. And it imparts this purple kind of haze on everything, and not the purple haze that we've been hearing so much about. And then the Windows Phone 8X like kind of over sharpens everything and puts kind of maybe a greenish pallor on it. And then the Lumia's err on the side of pink as well, it looks like, with the 920 doing a little more in that regard. But it's striking how similar the 810 and the 920, how similar their results are. So I happen to like the Galaxy Note 2 most out of all of these, to tell you the truth. But listeners, you'll want to go on and check out both reviews to see what the thing is, what your feelings are about which camera is the best. And certainly I'm no photographer, but if you look at the gallery from the 810, from the shots that I took, including one that my friend took of me looking rather mournful about something, it's a solid camera for a mid-range phone, and the 810 as a whole delivers a solid mid-range experience. It's built like just a big block of wood or something, though. I mean, it's really intense.
I liked your drop test in the video, Michael.
Thank you. Yeah,
it's very bold of you.
I didn't want to beat up the review unit too badly, but I'm like, yeah, this is the kind of phone. And my favorite analogy in that review was that it's like the Nexus 7 of smartphones. Because when I'm carrying around the Nexus 7, right, it's not like I'm carrying around an iPad. It's not like I'm carrying around something that's like, oh, I got to be delicate with it because it's fancy. No, you toss it around and it's fine. That's what the 810 feels like. It feels like it'll take a beating. It's not something you have to baby, and I think that's going to be attractive to a lot of people. I do not think that it's worth $149.99 on a 2-year contract.
Not with the Lumia 920 at $100.
Right. Now, I mean, they are on different carriers, and I started thinking about that as I was writing the conclusion. I kind of put it in there where I was like, yeah, if you're on T-Mobile, if you're married to T-Mobile USA and you really like what they give you, then you should... This is the closest you can get to a high-end Lumia device, right? Unless you buy an unlocked 920, which isn't going to support T-Mobile's bands, right?
So, I was also not surprised. I was intrigued to hear that your results on T-Mobile were very similar to mine, with the subpar indoor performance and the inconsistent data speeds. And and then I wonder to myself, T-Mobile has some good phones, and in optimum conditions they have a fast network and so forth. But if that's true, for taking an average sampling of the population, you and me, in pretty big highly populated areas and some areas that are not, and we have this experience, then what about the rest of the people? Do T-Mobile users just contend with poor indoor performance in exchange for the unlimited data and so forth? I started to, I was wondering, what do these people think about?
That's a good question, and this goes back to the carrier discussion. Where some people, the carriers it generate loyalty, based on a lot of a lot of anecdotal stuff. It's like, well, where I live and work, this works well for me. And I used to be that guy with Sprint. Like, Sprint always worked well for me. Almost wherever I lived and worked, it was always a solid provider. And then I'd hear literally thousands of people on the internet and in person, people just telling me, oh, Sprint, they're just terrible. I can't get service with them anywhere. So, I understand what it's like to have these inconsistent results. And I know that T-Mobile provides good service somewhere. I think it's... Miriam Jouar over at Engadget is like the biggest T-Mobile fan ever, and so I mean, it works some places. It works in wherever other people are. It doesn't work where I am.
It's kind of like, I guess, AT&T, where AT&T is my carrier of choice because around here it works extremely well.
Yeah.
But if I lived in New York City or if I lived in San Fran or Las Vegas, I couldn't possibly use AT&T. At least last I checked. Maybe it's changing now with LTE. But there are times when you cannot make a call just because there are too many people on the phone at the same time. So right. I think you're right that it just matters where you live and what works in your area.
It does, yeah, and I really hope that everyone, I know not everyone reads these monster reviews that we whip up. Like mine, I think this one's 4,000 words. I mean, it's huge. But if you're going to read any part of it, it's like, read the part that says your mileage may vary. You need to go use your 14-day or 30-day exchange period to your advantage. Go buy the phone, use it where you live and work. Make sure that the coverage will work for you, because it doesn't matter what we say, and it certainly doesn't matter what Verizon says, for example. Just because I'm still bitter about my time in the Northeast Corridor, where I'm zooming past banners for AT&T's 4G LTE network, and I've got 4G LTE service on my Lumia 920, and meanwhile my Verizon phone, which I'm tethering off of, is like 1x RTT, like 20 kilobits down. I'm like, for real, guys? It's like America's largest network. It's like, no, stop it.
20 kilobits.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's the T-Mobile story, and just to wrap up the 810 story, my biggest disappointment wasn't on the network side. It was in maps. Brandon talked about this a little bit, and Tony, when you had a Windows phone, what was your last Windows phone? The 610 to review?
I used 7.5, so I have never touched Windows Phone 8. And back in the day, it was Bing Maps.
It was Bing Maps, right? And now it's now in Windows Phone 8, it's Nokia Maps, which I was so looking forward to. I was like, all right, good. We're getting rid of the Bing Maps, which I was disappointed with on the My Focus, my personal daily driver last year. Maybe Nokia Maps will be awesome. No, it's just horrible. It's embarrassing, is what it is. It's like, the thing is, there's like a sorry, it was like it's Brandon's rolling thunder from his keyboard coming in from. I'm not moving.
I'm doing jumping jacks, but.
Oh, okay. No, the thing is, like, you can go into Nokia Maps, and you can do what I did yesterday, which is, well, I'm hungry. I want to go to Boston Burger Company, my favorite place ever, for dinner, and then let me just search for it here on my 810 or my 920. It doesn't matter, and it does dutifully report where Boston Burger Company is located, the location that's 3 miles away. Meanwhile, literally 6 blocks down the road is another Boston Burger Company. As a matter of fact, it's the original one. That doesn't even show up in the results list. This similar thing happened when I was on a train ride. I was on an Amtrak train. I was looking at the terminal for the Crossound Ferry in New London, Connecticut. I did a search for Crossound Ferry with local results. It returned results for the Crossound Ferry terminal on Long Island in New York.
Now I have a question, and sorry for interrupting.
Please.
Is this happening with the online maps, or is this also happening with the maps you download as of Nokia Maps, and you can use them offline too?
It's not the downloadable ones. The experience I've had with the downloadable ones has been on Nokia Drive. I have not downloaded maps on Nokia Maps, on the Bing Maps, Plus. So this is all online. This is I would
I
just
get
do a comparison between, and I also didn't download them when I was on my Android phone when I'm doing that straight comparison. I'm like, okay, what do you have to say about this Android? Oh, what do you know? Google Maps is the best mapping solution ever, and it gets the job done. And it does it 10 times better than it happens on Windows Phone. So, but it was just such a disappointment to me. I wouldn't be so irritated about it if I hadn't expected it to be so much better as a result of the transition to Nokia Maps. But I don't see how I could use this. And these are the 2 examples I cite in the review, but there are many more. And if I'm going to be using this, 920 as my daily driver, I need to use a third-party mapping solution that interfaces with Google Maps, or I need to just go to like maps.google.com in the browser. I don't want to do that. It's not a good mapping solution, and it's embarrassing. It shouldn't be at this level right now. This platform's been out for 2 years. It should be better. So
it's funny that you say that, because Nokia is so proud of their mapping service, and now with the Microsoft collaboration, they not only destroy in their marketing and all of their ad campaigns the iPhone maps, but they also put themselves at the same level with Google Maps. I mean, They regard themselves as the alternative. And
that may be the case in Europe. It may be the case in other parts of America. I will tell you that between Boston and New York City, at least in the past week, that has not been my experience, and it's very disappointing. So I think I want to go a little more in depth with this, and maybe write a piece on it. And so this is not the last you'll hear about this, listeners. But we'll see how it goes. I really hope it improves very quickly. Brandon, you didn't mention this too much in your thoughts on Windows Phone 2 years later, but Brandon has a great video, which I just watched this morning, about his experience, with Windows Phone 8 after 2 years with Windows Phone. Do you want to elaborate on some more of what you thought about coming onto the new platform?
Yeah, sure. Briefly. About 2 years ago, I was using the Samsung Focus as my daily driver for a while because I really liked it. It had this new operating system, and at the time it was kind of Android, which was laggy and had some problems, and it just iOS, which had its own problems of being too tied down and too limited. And so the Samsung Focus was an interesting departure from both of those, because it was kind of the middle ground between not having enough control like in iOS and having tons and tons of control like you have in Android. And with Windows Phone, you can kind of customize the look of your main screen. You have live information and yet also static icons that link to programs. And it was just totally different. It was fluid. It was fast. But the problem 2 years ago was that the app story was poor. Yeah. Most major apps were accounted for, but the vast majority of second and third tier apps were just not there because developers were it's kind of like the Windows RT problem. They're thinking, should I spend time and resources to develop on this new platform, or should I spend more time on Android, iOS, and the other platforms that are already making me money? Right. So I got an 8X, and I was very curious to see if the experience had changed 2 years later. So I used it for a full week, and it was very familiar, and yet a little bit different. And I mean that in a good, and a bad way. I mean it in the good way because that fluidity was there, that interestingness of something new and fast, something that just worked and was well thought out. I mean, Windows Phone 8 is a really good operating system from end to end in terms of the UI and the responsiveness. And that was great. And it was cool to see Windows Phone 8 with a high-res display. It was cool to see Windows Phone 8 with, it's powered by a dual-core processor, although it didn't feel that much faster than the Focus, I've got to be honest.
Well, yeah, and I think you say it in the video, because Windows Phone 7 was so fluid, there was almost no room for improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's kind of disappointing to me because I remember talking to some of the Microsoft guys back in 2010 and 11. I think it was 11 when I asked why isn't Windows Phone 7.5 optimized for dual core support, and while all these Androids were coming out with dual core, and they said, well, we want to do it right. We don't want to rush it out. And I thought to myself, that must mean that they're going to do something with dual core support that that the other platforms just aren't doing. And well, that turned out not to be the case.
Right.
In terms of the good, like I said, everything was fast and fluid, high resolution display. It was that feeling that I had 2 years ago. But then I also had that bad feeling when I went into the App Store and I searched for a wide variety of apps that weren't there, partly because and correct me on this if I'm wrong, apps have to be rewritten for Windows Phone 8?
Thank you for bringing this up. I don't know, right? Because I was so excited when I got my Lumia. I was like, oh, great. I know that it has Spotify, so I don't really need anything else. No, it doesn't, because Spotify has to be rewritten for Windows Phone 8. Or
some apps
do and some apps don't. I also don't know. I feel very undereducated about this.
It's very possible that the really high-end apps, I guess you could say, like Spotify, the developer has decidedly has chosen to rewrite the app to take advantage of some of the new things in Windows Phone 8. And so but it's unfortunate because you can't get Spotify for Windows Phone 8 right now.
There are two aspects, guys. First of all, is the shared core, the kernel with the desktop operating system, and then again is the variety of resolutions for which have to be coded within the application itself. With Windows Phone 7 and 7.5, it was WVGA, and that was all.
I see.
So Spotify probably pulled their app thinking that, if someone downloads this, they're going to get a low-res experience, and that's going to make people pretty upset. And I guess if they release it in the next few weeks, that's fine because, Windows Phone 8 devices are just now hitting store shelves. So it's not like there's millions and millions of people that are crying because Spotify's not out there.
Right. And, and then speaking of Spotify, we have to touch on Pandora as well, which, Lumia buyers or Windows Phone 8 buyers, I forget what it is, are going to get a full year of Pandora 1 for free, which is great.
That's
but
sweet.
The Pandora app won't even be available until 2013. So this is not I guess this is not a negligible amount of work that needs to be done. Like there's some core level. And Tony, as you just said, there's a lot of legwork that needs to be done to make these apps right. Yeah. So, but that's so frustrating. You see Microsoft make the announcement doing all this kind of bluster and being like, yeah, we got 120,000 apps and we're going to have 46 of the top 50. It's like, great. When?
I think this comes back to a point that Tony made in a previous podcast about Windows Phone being the story of like not being done in time and waiting and I think in this case, Windows Phone 8 was rushed out. There's talk of a notification center that didn't make it in. The first version of Windows Phone 7 was rushed out so quickly that they didn't have copy and paste, which is strange coming from the company that invented copy and paste on a mobile device.
Right.
So to wrap this up, my conclusion in using Windows Phone 8 for a week was that at the end I decided to go back to Android/iOS depending on the device of the day, and that is because my experience is the same as it was 2 years ago, which is good, and it's also bad. So.
Well, to wrap it up and to put words in your mouth, Windows Phone 9 will be a great operating system.
Yeah, that's the one I'm waiting for.
Yeah, I will say that just to give my final thoughts on Windows Phone 8 as a whole, I kind of disparaged the talk about how Microsoft was so big on demoing resizable live tiles because, frankly, I was tired of seeing it. Right, I was bored. I was like, stop showing me that. Then I put resizable live tiles as like a 10-second little segment in my Lumia 810 review because it's really cool. You can make a really cool looking home screen, and I've kind of struggled over the past couple days to make my home screen look like something I want to look good and also feel good using. And I think I've gotten to a good point with that. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. And I'm surprised by how much that little tweak, just introducing that other live tile size, by how much that has changed the daily experience, and I really like it. Particularly on the Lumia. Go ahead.
Oh, continue. Sorry.
No, that's all right. Particularly on the Lumia 920 is what I was going to say. Which last week when we podcasted, it was before the Lumia 920 official launch day, and I just, if you haven't seen the video, listeners, I whipped up a video of my own Lumia 920 unboxing, and that's my own unit. That's not a review. I paid for that one. And I also shot just a little bit of footage of my in-store experience. And we talked a little bit before about carriers and their supportive device launches. And, I don't want to crap all over AT&T here because they were just busting their butts to correct these reports as they came out. of kind of lackluster launches in stores across the country. And really, I mean, we work closely with the PR people at AT&T, and it was very clear to see on Twitter and on email and all that stuff how hard they were working to try and address issues that cropped up. But in the store, like, I was surprised. The AT&T store reps were wearing Windows Phone 8 T-shirts, and that's about where it stopped. Like, there were no demo devices on the store. This is my experience at the Cambridge, Massachusetts store. There were no demo devices out running Windows Phone 8. All the Windows Phone demo devices on the floor were Windows Phone 7 devices. And yes, this is an official AT&T retail store, not a third-party dealer. The retail stores were only stocked with 3 colors of the Lumia 920 because the cyan version was apparently an online exclusive and the gray version is apparently an international exclusive. Stop with the exclusives. Like, wouldn't it be great if you could walk into a store and get any one of the 5 available colors?
Michael, I am so with you, since most of the exclusives are U.S. only.
I was going to say,
yeah.
You
Stop
usually
with
get screwed, right? And I don't. Yeah, of course, I sound like the first world problem American, right? I'm like, come on, But no, I understand. I feel your pain, Tony. Like, now I get it. I understand what it's like to be shut out of something when they tell me I can't get the cyan because I'm not online, and I can't get the gray because it's an international one. I'm like, well, okay.
That's how we feel about the Droid DNA and all the other good stuff you guys get.
I know. You know what? I know.
That's a recent occurrence. I mean, Europe got everything.
That's true.
2008.
Exactly.
Now I think the LTE thing really helped the U.S. to get in the forefront of these mobile device releases.
Yeah, agreed. And I just wish, but I think I feel the pain of Windows Phone, fans, because they see these kind of lackluster carrier launch. And I wouldn't even bring this up, but other outlets have reported on this. Like, people have run with headlines saying, like, AT&T's launch of the Lumia 920 was really weird. And it's true. And I remember their launch of the Veer back in the WebOS days. And, this isn't an AT&T thing. All carriers do this, and they fawn over who they like, and they kind of ignore who they don't. And, sometimes mistakes are made or whatever. But it just felt so half-baked.
Yeah, but don't forget, and this is I'm remembering this exactly quote that Steve Ballmer said back in the day, that AT&T is the premier Windows Phone carrier, and this just doesn't sound like that.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it doesn't. But of course, you know what? Here, when you have no competition in that space, then I guess you can do what you want, right? Because Verizon had carried one Windows Phone that they cared anything about, and then now they're making a big noise about carrying all the new ones, sure, but for Windows Phone 7, they didn't do anything, really.
Yeah, imagine all carriers had the Lumia 920. Now imagine that AT&T involvement.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's very true. So, and then there's T-Mobile, who's small, but they have the 8X and they have the 810. So it's a very interesting landscape today. I think maybe some carriers may have been burned by maybe buying into the buzz on Windows Phone 7 and then just having a whole lot of inventory. I don't know.
Right.
We'll see. It was very half-baked. Go ahead.
I'm fascinated, Michael, to hear about for listeners that don't understand or realize this, we bounce around from phones all the time, but we always come back to sort of our home carrier that we're married to, that we have 2-year contracts on, or we have a prepaid plan on, and devices that we own and we don't have to send back.
Right.
And Michael made a very bold move of changing his home carrier, I think, from Verizon to AT&T, and buying with his own dough a Lumia 920. And he has yet to have time to, I think, really settle down with that, because his plate has been full with other devices. But I'm fascinated to hear, in a similar way that I went through the process, how you like Windows Phone 8 on the Lumia 920 after a week or two of usage.
I'm very excited. I will be very excited to share those thoughts. And you're absolutely right. I bought the 920 last Friday, and then this entire week has been. I brought it home last Friday. I did the unboxing video.
You used it for 5 minutes.
I used it for 5 minutes, and I also bought, as listeners might know, the JBL Power Up speaker dock, which I also unboxed on video and showed you. And I was like, wow, this is great. I put the JBL box on my desk. I plugged it in. I put the 920 on top of it. It charged. And then I haven't used it since. I haven't been able to because I've been
Because you're
reviewing
using all the
DNA.
cool stuff, man.
Exactly.
Like the Droid DNA.
What a wonderful
You're living
problem
life.
to have. I mean, it is true. And I will say this just to wrap up my thoughts on that. Even though AT&T didn't have the best launch, they didn't have the free wireless charging plate in stock. Because Lumia 920 buyers are supposed to get the wireless charging plate for free as a limited time promotion for launch day and so forth. So they didn't have it in the store, and I was like, "Come on, guys! Really? Another thing you don't have?" But you know what? AT&T took down my info. They shipped it the same day, I think, and it came to me on the following Monday. So
Nice.
it's sitting next to me right now. It is great. Also, it charges the Droid DNA, as we were discussing off the air before the podcast started.
Speaking of making good on promises, my Nexus 4 just shipped the 8 gigabyte, the first one I ordered.
Hey, congratulations! Did you order a wireless charging orb as well?
I don't think they're up for sale yet, are they?
Oh, maybe they're not. I really want one. I want a Nexus 4 just to use the charging orb, and then I'll send it back. Anyway.
Do you guys? I got a question. Where do you charge your phones when you go to sleep at night?
Now I've got the JBL power-up dock next to my bed, and so I put the phone on top of that. But normally they live on my bedstand.
Within reach. What about you, Tony?
On my desk, my office setup has also a bed. So my room is my bed, has my computer, has my... Basically, it's all in one for me. I live and work here, so all my devices are being charged on the desk in arm's reach from my bed.
Okay, so you both have it close to your bed. I've got this weird phobia, and I hope you can talk me down from it. I'm afraid. I really want to put my phone on the nightstand, so it's within easy reach. But I put it like across the room because I'm like paranoid that the radio waves, the Wi-Fi, the LTE are gonna like harm my brain and give me some sort of like illness.
It's not like you're not surrounded with 10 phones all the time.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Plus, like even if the phone's not nearby you, you're getting bathed in Wi-Fi all day anyway, and LTE. I mean, and FM radio waves and all that kind of stuff.
And who knows what you don't know about?
Yeah. I don't think you need to worry about that, Brandon, because what is the there's an FCC mandated distance from the body that your phone should be. Like they have to include this warning in the manual. And if you ever read any of the safety and product information on any of the phones, they're like, nobody does. But a lot of them, like Motorola especially, is big on saying like, we don't recommend you carry your phone in your chest pocket. Like put it in a holster and make sure it's.
Yeah, do you guys remember back in the day? I was like posting almost every week or every second week something about SAR ratings, SAR.
Oh yes.
Those things just died out. We don't see any more posts like that.
Right. So if the listeners who don't know what SAR is, it's a specific absorption rate, and it's a measurement of how much radiation is absorbed by your tissues. I think there's something to do with.
Nobody cared about those either, but it was nice to see, for instance, the brand new HTC being lower SAR rated than, I don't know, the iPhone. I'm just making up something now, but we don't see that nowadays. I mean, they all have radiations. We just don't know to which extent.
You know what I think, and I think this is a symptom of voice calling dying out to a degree, because the big deal about this whole flap was that the more radiation a phone put out, the more dosage you were getting right out against your skull. And they showed like, the CAT scan images of like, the brain, localized brain heating or something like that. And it was like, wow, that's crazy. But nobody talks on the phone anymore. So, I mean, we're all texting. They're all down by our, they're all in our hands down in front of our torso.
Nebraska.
Except in Nebraska. Nicely done. Anyway, let's move on from that. Just briefly, so we can get iOS in the conversation. Even though it's been a slow week for iOS, Google's reportedly testing its Google Maps app for App Store submission, which I'm sure is making Apple users everywhere just salivate. As someone who very briefly had to deal with a crappy Maps experience, in my case, Bing or Nokia Maps, I feel your pain in a different sense. So. I really hope that Google Maps gets launched on iOS soon, because we all know that would be a good thing for everybody but Apple, I guess.
I have a different opinion. I don't think so. So far, listen, I'm not hating on Google or stuff like that, but so far Google's been all talk, no action. They were all like, we're working, or we would work if Apple approved, and all that nebula. You don't know of specific plans. You know what, Google? Get the application out, let Apple reject you, and then just kill them for that. Just don't come with ideas like we would work if we knew that Apple would approve, but we don't know that. No, just get the application out, send it for approval, and if they disapprove, which I think they will because they got out of bed with Google for a specific reason, which is iOS Maps, then just do your best to bash Apple. Until then, just make the app.
If Apple turns them down, if Apple rejects Google's mapping application, that would be the ballsiest move of the year.
I mean, I don't think it will be ballsier than removing Google Maps from iOS.
Oh no, well, no. I think it would because look, they removed Google Maps from iOS and they thought, maybe a lot of people in the company thought they had a competing product that would work well, but launching a product that is inferior, having a giant public uproar over how crappy it is, and then when your white knight comes back to say, hey, you want to use it, you want your customers to be happy, being like, no.
I know. It's
that would be intense.
I still think that they will not approve this application, or they will make probably make up some conditions that Google will not approve. I think the entire reason for this move, beyond the thermonuclear war between Apple and Google, was for Apple to finally start off their mapping project, good or bad, as it is. It will improve, but if they made the first, we have a saying here, if you say A, also say B.
Mm-hmm.
Before we leave iOS, may I make a comment?
Please do. I've got one short one as well in iOS before we go, but please do, yeah.
Okay, I'd like to suggest that now is a terrible time to buy either iPad, and here is why. We are obviously between generations. The iPad 5 the big version will clearly have the in-cell touch technology. It's going to be thinner and lighter because Apple knows that we really are all tired of the size and the weight. The iPad 4 is like an iPad 3. It's entirely too heavy and thick. And so the next generation iPad 9.7 inch is the one to get. Then the iPad mini, on the other hand, is also a product with compromise. And we could argue about this all day, but the low pixel, the low resolution does matter. And you can do things like hold it at arm's length away from your face, or you could say to yourself, well, the compromise here is that I get a low resolution screen, but I get this incredible hardware with very, very thin and light form factor that's even thinner and lighter than the Nexus 7. But the iPad mini is a first-gen product. The iPad mini 2 is most likely going to have a Retina display, and I think that if people are thinking about buying an iPad, they should wait on both till the next generation.
So you're suggesting they should wait until October 2013?
Do you think that's when the iPad 5 will come out?
I think they now settled for a yearly cycle with bringing the iPad to October, the iPad mini to October, the iPhone to September. So I think there will be no more March Q1 or Q2 releases.
Yeah, that sounds right. They did that with the iPhone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you gotta wait.
Yeah, I would say your wisdom is sound, your logic is sound. I don't think people are going to, because the thing I was going to say was that I was waiting on the AT&T store to open, and I went in to get my Lumia 920. I went into the Apple store while I waited, and I didn't realize, guys. You guys didn't tell me this. You guys did not tell me that the iPad Mini was like so light that you feel like you're on a planet with less gravity.
I mean, told you.
You told me, but I don't think it really hit my brain right, because you have to, listeners, if you
have to feel it.
I don't care what you feel about iOS, because heaven knows I find iOS to be very, very dull, and it's certainly not the OS for me. But man, you go into an Apple store right now, drop what you're doing. It's Friday. Go into an Apple store and find yourself an iPad Mini and just hold it. It feels like, once again, a cardboard, like it feels like a dummy device. It feels like something that a third-party retailer would put on the shelf so it doesn't get stolen. Like it doesn't. It's incredible. I don't even know if I like it. It's so light. I mean, I like a little heft, but man, oh man. Anyway, so
do you think it's too thin?
No, I don't think it's too thin. No. I do think that the bezel thumb rejection on the sides is a little inconsistent, but I don't think it's too thin, no.
Do you think, Tony, do you think a piece of paper is too thin?
Depends on what you're comparing it with.
This no one's talking about. I think people are starting to talk about this. This in-cell touch that Apple has on the iPhone 5 and the iPad Mini significantly reduces touch responsiveness. And I'm hearing some of my friends being like, my iPhone 5, the keyboard, it doesn't feel as good as the 4S. And you know, it's because it's a different touch technology, and it's worse for touch responsiveness.
Really?
Did you experience that? And I didn't.
On the iPad, yeah, I did to a degree. It's just, it feels a little bit more numb. Some people might note it. People coming from like the iPad 3 or the iPhone 4S will notice it, but people picking up for the first time won't. But it's subtle. But I think it's a problem.
Well, that's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that looks going forward. Maybe once everyone gets tired of talking about purple haze, that'll be the next thing. I want to jump into reader mail before we close out the day, guys. We have the reader mail today is all from, or the reader mail we're reading is all from people who've written us before. So this is the reader mail returning writers hour, and by hour I mean 5 minutes.
Wishful thinking.
Yes, I know, right? But these are all really good questions. They're really cool. So, guys, everyone, thank you for writing in again, and everyone who wrote in, whose letters we won't get to, thank you. Please write again. Kenneth Meadows II says, "Hey, guys, I was wondering with all these Nexus rumors going around, do you think that we will ever see manufacturers offer customers the option to pick their own phone hardware?" And I'm like, what? Wait, what? What do you mean? And his sentence continues, "Like Alienware does or did with PCs." Also, thanks for the advice on my phone color. You're welcome, Kenneth Meadows. That's an intriguing question. Do you think manufacturers will ever let us, as customers, custom order our own phone hardware and like just plug in? It's like, yeah, you know what? I want to go for the 2 gigs of RAM. No, put 4 gigs of RAM in there, and go ahead and put the flaming skull LEDs on the back, and you know, go give me the neon green paint job on the sides. Like, what do you think, guys? See, I can see this happening.
I actually looked into this because I was sort of messing with the idea of creating, I don't know, it would take years and years, creating a website that would allow you to do that. But after looking into it, it occurred to me that yes, you could do that if you're willing to charge $2,000 for a phone. Because the complexities involved in having to change the firmware on each different configuration, like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 preset configurations. But if you get Dell or Alienware style, where you could probably have hundreds or thousands of different combinations, you have to create that many different kinds of firmware, and you have to support all those different kinds of firmware. And not only that, but don't forget about the engineering. If you want to have 16 gigs of RAM in your phone, you're going to have to move around other things. You're going to have to create different cases. It's probably going to be thick. And the people that are getting the really high spec phones to fit in a certain case, it's going to be the same case that the people with the bottom line phones are, because you're not going to have 5,000 different cases. It's so complex.
Yeah. Tony?
I don't think it will ever happen because of the second reason Brandon told you. It's just, I think the reason because let's take HTC for instance. HTC has the flagship One X Plus, has the Desire C, so you have several different models, and you can basically choose the hardware configuration by choosing a different model. But what I would pretty much like to see, and this is something we're discussing almost weekly with the guys on the Pocketnow team, would be an experience when I would take my phone out of the box, I would boot it for the first time, and it would ask me, do you want the HTC experience? If yes, then I would have all the HTC Sense 4 point whatever experience. Or do you want the Android vanilla experience? And then I would have a Nexus-like phone. That's what I want.
You know what? I think that
and that's doable.
That is totally doable, and that's doable today. I think that will be an element. Look at, I think that proves... that goes a ways toward proving my point, which is I think I disagree with you guys. I think we will see this happen because we're starting to see these really crazy software customizations. We're not seeing that, Tony, yet, and I hope we do at some point, that we see the option to go raw or to go skin. But smartphones are more and more. I mean, people are becoming more and more aware that smartphones are are the computers of today and tomorrow. Like smartphones and tablets are it. And I think as it continues to mature, as the world continues to mature, you're going to find manufacturers who are willing to say, hey, this worked in computers, let's see if we can bring it to smartphones. And some of them will fail miserably, but some of them may find this market. And there were people, I know Virtue isn't doing very well and Nokia is selling them off or whatever, but there were people who would pay thousands of dollars for a phone that ran like, you know, crappy dumbware stuff, and like they were diamond encrusted, and that was their big thing. But I think there are people who would pay a premium price for a phone that is custom made, and you know, I don't know.
I don't think that the software is the main problem. Opposed to laptops and desktop computers, when you can basically throw in any hardware component you want, a smartphone has limited space, and it would take a huge standardization across manufacturers of internal components like CPUs, GPUs, memories. They would have to have the same socket sizes. They would have to have the same dimensions, because basically in a plant, I have never been in a plant producing smartphones, but I've been in other plants. It's just robots who take the internals and put it in their specific place. So you have to have compatibility issues, and this is something which I don't think anybody wants at the moment.
So you'd have to, like a company would have to offer like 5 different configurations. Like you couldn't really custom build your very own, but you could be like, here, a company would be like, here's 5 or 6 versions of the same thing. It would be like an HP approach to smartphones.
Yeah, and you kind of look historically at, of course, Dell was first to do built to order computers, and at the time, you know, there was Gateway 2000, there was IBM, there were all of those other huge industry players, and then Dell came in and made a brand for itself based on the fact that it was willing to do something different, and I don't remember what happened in the 90s, but I think that if you went to the Dell website, you could go to archive.org to see this. Your configurations were relatively limited. I mean, it wasn't nearly as extensive as it is today with, 7, 8 CPU options. I think you had like 3 CPU options and 2 different kinds of RAMs.
But they were the first to do it, so they had that room because nobody else was doing anything like it. So 5 choices is better than 1. Yeah, and I think that I think we'll see it. I just I agree. I think you guys bring up really great points, but I think this industry is so obsessed with the future, and it is so resistant to becoming stagnant. As much as we complain about things like form factors and stuff, it's just moving so quickly forward that I think we're going to see a bold manufacturer do this at some point.
And let's not forget that people are slowly thinking about the idea of their phone replacing their laptop and their desktop through external keyboards and monitors and such. So having someone pay $1,500 or $2,000 for a really high-end phone that replaces all your machines is not totally ridiculous.
Right. So let's we're gonna jump to the last piece of listener mail here. This is from our friend Sibin Sedlan. And who tells me I got his name right last time? So I think so.
From Serbia, right?
I don't remember. He actually didn't say in this piece of listener mail, and I don't want to get it wrong by guessing this time. But he asks an interesting question, which I have been thinking about too. He says, Android has rooting, which enables it to be fully customized and tampered with. iOS and iPhone have jailbreaking, which is pretty similar to Android's rooting. With all that in mind, I would like to ask a question. What does Windows Phone have? What kind of hack is there for Windows Phone? I've been wondering this question for a long time. Well, yeah, but I specifically looked up Windows Phone 8, right? And if you Google Windows Phone 8 custom mods or Windows Phone 8 modding or whatever, it's amazing because it looks like this frontier town that's empty and not yet really built yet, and waiting for people to move into it. Because no one, there's a bunch of fan sites and a bunch of URL squatters who've reserved crap whatever, Windows Phone 8 hacks, hacksaws.net or whatever. But there's not really a lot of talk about this.
Because it's been out for 2 weeks.
Exactly, and it's built on an entirely different kernel than 7 was, so it has to be an entirely different approach. And I remember, what did Windows Phone 7 have? What was the name of their jailbreak thing?
Was it Chevron?
Yeah, Chevron WP. Yes. But even that didn't allow you to do much, right? Could you even put an image behind your home screen tiles?
No. You could basically just sideload applications, and if you had the proper bootloaders and the proper files, you could flash a ROM which already was jailbroken.
Right. Yeah. So that's it. I mean, and sideloading apps is a big deal. I don't mean to diminish it, but This is a good point. You know, with iOS, you can jailbreak it and make it look like kind of however you want, even though it runs poorly. With Android, of course, you can do whatever you want to it. So, like, do you guys think we're going to see, with the Windows Phone 8 kind of cracking community take shape, or what? I mean, I think we've got to see it at some point, right?
I think we will see more of that than we have seen with Windows Phone 7 and Windows Phone 7.5 because exactly of the fact that it has a shared kernel with Windows 8.
Yes, agreed. This is a question that's kind of also addressed by our third piece of listener mail, which I won't read, but Philip from Cardiff in the UK, thank you again for writing in. But he's saying, you know, in the Pictures Hub, you can choose the background image, and that image is displayed as the app icon. And in Xbox Music, the background changes to the current music you're playing. So Philip's making the argument that Windows Phone is actually, in some ways, more customizable than Android.
If we're talking aspect customization, yeah, but if we're talking like performance tweaks and stuff like that, no.
Then no, right? Yeah, and I
so
think
just like performance tuning versus visual tuning.
Yeah. I think it calls to mind, the differences between all these platforms again, and how awesome the differences are. How cool! Even though we only have three major players in the landscape, there really is something for everybody. But I would love to see the Windows Phone 8 hacking community kind of take off and deliver functionality that we don't have. Because for as much as I love the modern UI and the Windows Phone experience as a whole, there's so much about it that just still feels so bare bones.
You know what I want? What I would like? If Joe Belfiore is listening to this podcast, I know he is because he commented recently on one of our posts on Pocketnow. Joe, if you're listening to this, I would like to see the ability to have a wallpaper on Windows Phone 8 and the live tiles to be 25, 30, 35% transparent so I can see the wallpaper behind it, still see the tiles just like glass style, and that will be the ultimate customization for me.
Oh man, that sounds like something I would just hate. But you know what? Options are good, right? I mean, I don't know. I guess we'll have to see going forward. I think what I'm excited, guys, just to kind of wrap up my thoughts on the day, I'm excited that Windows Phone 8 is finally here. For all the things that I would change about it, there's also a lot I really love about it, and I'm glad that we're going to kind of watch it grow, and that'll be the way we close out 2012 with this kind of resurgent platform that is finally getting its day in the sun, it looks like, and we'll see how that works out. So,
quick Windows Phone 8 question for both of you guys.
Yeah.
Windows Phone 8, according to Gartner, Windows Phone, according to Gartner, is at 2.4% market share.
Globally?
Where do you see Windows Phone in 6 months from now?
It's 2.4% globally?
Yeah.
In 6 months from now, I think it'll be at, no less than 8%.
And to whose loss?
Well, there's still some BlackBerry share to eat up, right?
And Symbian?
And of course Symbian. Yeah, I think it's going to be mainly BlackBerry and Symbian. I don't think iOS. I don't think Android users are going anywhere. I think iOS. There might be some ports from iOS, but yeah, I would say
Brandon?
I don't know about the market share number, but there's one thing that's for sure, which is that we talked about the Surface RT on a previous podcast, and there had always there had been rumors of a Surface phone by Microsoft, and that could be an extremely awesome, amazing piece of technology that Microsoft could spend all of their cash advertising to increase market share of Windows Phone. But the problem is, guess what? They scarred the Surface brand a little bit with this RT. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. So so that card, if they play it, and dare they play it, because they're going to really piss off Nokia and some other OEMs, will be far less impactful now because of the problems associated with the Surface RT.
The diminished Surface brand, right? But I don't know. I just think that working in concert with Windows 8, which of course has its own problems as far as popularity and adoption, desire and all that. I think that it's such a big thing. It's such a big unified push from Microsoft, and they're so dedicated to making it work. If in 6 months the Windows Phone market share is less than 8%, I would be really, really surprised.
Don't forget that iOS is at 13%, so that will mean it will catch up to iOS quickly.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm being uncharacteristically optimistic this morning. So, Anyway, guys, any final thoughts before we wrap it up? Because I think we are about ready to go get the workday started.
There goes our 1 hour podcast.
I know. Even when we try to be short, it's just. But, it's a good problem to have because we had listener mail, and it's always great to hear from you, listeners. So thank you for.
We'll never make 1 hour podcast.
No, it's never going to happen.
Get used to it.
Guys, thank you for. Thanks for joining me on the air today, as usual. Listeners, we're not sure what's going to happen next week, which is a holiday week here in the United States. We may well return to the airwaves again. But we will let you know either way, and you should follow us on Twitter so you know whether or not we will be doing a show next week. The official account is at Pocketnow Tweets. You can follow Tony over there at Anton D. Nadja, ANTONDNAGY. Follow Brandon Miniman at Brandon Miniman. You can follow me, Michael Fisher, at Captain Two Phones. You can follow us on Facebook and Google Plus as well. That's Pocketnow, not our personal accounts. I don't know about you guys. I do not generally friend anyone I don't actually know in real life. Sorry.
Yeah, that's the same with me too.
Okay, good. Just to clear that up.
But my Twitter is public.
Yeah, but Twitter, totally. Yeah, anybody can follow me on Twitter.
Same here.
Good. Please continue leaving us reviews on iTunes or Zune if you like the podcast. We really love hearing from you. And if you have a topic, question, or suggestion for the podcast, or you just want to say hi, we love that too, please email us, podcast@pocketnow.com. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.